Well, now I want to turn to Steve Sherrill for what do you want to talk about? So, Steve, welcome. What do you want to talk about?
Well, tonight we're going to talk about something a little bit different. I think we're all aware of the Maui fires and the flooding in California and other catastrophes that have been occurring. Even some of us may have experienced a fire or a lightning striking us or a house or something like this. So I began to think about how many of our model railroaders friends have been affected by these catastrophes. And of course, at this moment, we probably don't know unless we know personally who lived in Maui or who was involved in the California floods and that kind of thing. But then I also got to thinking about insurance for my railroad. How I have an investment in my railroad, 30 years with this layout. And if something like that happened to me, a fire or, a plumbing leak that ruined, several buildings or that type of thing. So I went to my neighbor who owns an insurance agency, and I spoke to him today, and I said, what can I do? How can I get coverage for this? And he said, well, your homeowners only usually covers $1,000 or something in that area. And I said, well, my layout is probably worth a lot more than that if I was to have to rebuild it. Couple models, we were just talking about in just trains. If you have these articulated, they're probably $3,000 or $4,000 for one engine. If they were to be ruined, you'd be out that kind of money. So, and speaking to my friend who has the insurance agency, he said he was with Nationwide. He's not my insurance man, by the way. He said, well, you need to increase your coverage and include this type of addition. But he said, you're better off if you go to a company that specializes in this type of coverage. And so I said to him, well, can you help me out and give me some tips where I can go? So he said, yeah. So he went on his computer. He said, well, what's the NMRA? And I said, well, that's the National Model Railroad Association. And he said, well, they have an insurance. And you might want to look into that. Now, I'm not a member of the NMRA at this point. But I got on the website and I looked up the model insurance. And what I discovered was this is model railroaders talking to model railroaders about things that they might lose and how you would recover your losses. And they talk about items like getting your stuff valued. They talk about some of the formulas for replacements. They have a company that they deal with, and the company is called J.A. Bass Company, and they're in Pittsburgh. And they have a phone number you can call. And if you look up on NMRA, NMRA model insurance, they take you to this. You don't have to be a member to get on this site, by the way. You can just look it up and see. That's one of the benefits. Now, they do have various categories, and they have different plans. One is called an inventory plan, one is called a blanket plan, and one is called a layout plan. And then they explain what the different plans are. And most of what we have is probably going to be a layout plan, which covers everything that we would have. Now, what they have is a blanket. In the blanket plan, that covers up to $200,000 value. Most of us probably don't have that much. There may be some that have a large brass collection, which that would be. But what they say is take photographs of all your equipment, your layouts, underneath your layout, because your bench work is something that has to be insured. All your electronics, so that if something like this should happen, you need to be able to show them, hey, this is what I have, this is what I want to replace, and then you have a basis to have verification of what you had on your layout. They also go into basic coverage, which, in other words, they have a coverage plan. If you're a member, they have a plan that will cover up to a certain amount based on the three plans that I told you about. It's like $100, and depending on the plan, they will cover $13,000 in one of the categories, $16,000 in another category, and on up like that. All this information is on their website. Now, I think that it's well worth looking into, and everybody who has a layout and any substantial investment in model railroading needs to get insurance on this type of thing. You never know when it's going to happen. A plumbing leak is a great example. If you got a basement, you go away, pipe leaks, you come back, there you are, you know. But I just wanted to put that in there. I think it's well worth mentioning, and I don't think that we deal with this very often, but I think we need to do it. So if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them as best I can. But I do believe that we ought to discuss this as a group.
Steve, this is Jeff Jordan. I wanted to mention that I just did that. Indeed, I've been a member of the NMRA on and off for 3 or 4 times. I just rejoined the NMRA specifically for the reason you stated, so that I could purchase that insurance, and went through the whole process of obtaining a policy on my collection. The outfit in Pittsburgh is a super group of people to deal with. If you have questions, you can call them up and talk to them, and they know what you're talking about. And so my policy not only includes my layout, rolling stock, structures, unbuilt kits, it also includes my railroadiana collection, lanterns and the like. I did the inventory approach, which I think is a very good discipline, to sit down and actually list what you got, what you paid for it, what you think it's worth. And this is like much collector insurance. It's declared value insurance. You tell them what you got and how you value it, and they will basically insure your good faith values. The only caveat being that if you undervalue your collection, and suffer loss, you will suffer a shortfall. But the declared value is the value, is very reasonably priced. And I strongly agree with your suggestion that we've all spent a lot of years accumulating impressive collections, and in my case, a little over $100, I got an annual policy on my whole collection.
So you went above the minimum premium on the inventory coverage?
Yeah, well, I did the inventory, actually set out the values of my collection, added it all up, and then multiplied it by the factor they provide on the form, and the total came out to more than $100 worth. I think if you do an or the basic, you have to buy $100 worth. That's their minimum. And as
Right.
you say, that covers somewhere between $13,000 to $16,000 worth of material. And my collection came out slightly above that number. So I paid slightly more than $100.
Well, I definitely think it's worth looking into. I think I'm going to be joining the NMRA now for that coverage. I think that, if something happens, I want to be able to like rebuild. And I know someone who had this happen a while back, and they had a plumbing leak and it went on some items, and they actually got estimates for replacing it from a professional builder. And at the time, I think they were getting $25 or $35 an hour, and they estimated how many hours it cost to scratch build that, and they went ahead and paid for that, believe it or not. So I'm just saying that if you go to this website, again, NMRA model insurance, it doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to be a member. Just go and look. And if you don't do anything but use the NMRA for this to benefit you, it's well worth the time and money.
Steve,
Yes.
Pat here. I've experienced both a fire for total loss and a flood from a leaky pipe. So I know exactly where you're coming from. But in Canada here, I put a rider on the second one because the first happened in the 70s and they didn't have that kind of coverage from the NMRA. So the second one, I put a rider on my policy to cover what I figured was worth on the layout. And I'm glad I did because I experienced that flood damage from a leaky pipe. And I'll tell you, that's a sad thing to see when you go downstairs and everything's floating around in the water. So I know what it's all about.
Well, I'm just, we don't know how many of our friends are involved in this Maui fire where it destroyed everything. There's nothing to recover. I'm sure there are some, I'm sure there are some of them, but it's just, it's worth looking at. And if you don't, take the NMRA type of insurance, look, ask your own policy holder, because you'll be surprised that you don't have as much insurance on items as you really think. So that's it for tonight. If there are any more questions, we can certainly talk about this for a while, I'm sure.
Steve, I couldn't agree more with you because I priced it through my regular policy versus what the NMRA would cost me. And the NMRA is so much cheaper.
Yeah. Well, and if you go to the site, they explain stuff to you in model railroad type terms, whereas your regular insurance guy, he doesn't know about rolling stock, the value of anything, or 3-foot section. You're talking to the moon,
Yep.
So we're talking to, train guys on this.
Well, I really appreciate you bringing this subject up because it's something that we don't talk about enough. Maybe we just don't think about it either enough, but it's really a worthwhile discussion to have. And thank you so much for bringing it up.
Okay.